Okay, everybody. So Professor JaNae is going to take some time and talk to you about posing. We've gotten our garage set up here, and we've been fortunate enough to be blessed with a beautiful day, and we've got a west-facing entrance here, and we noticed that we're getting some great light bouncing off of the concrete and coming straight into the garage. So I'm going to turn it over to JaNae so she can talk to you about some posing techniques.
All right, so this is kind of the subject area where a lot of people start to really sort of tease out what their insecurities are, whether they're the ones in front of the camera or whether you're photographing someone who is maybe not as confident in front of the camera. What are those things that you can walk them through, especially if they're asking, hey, I don't usually take pictures, what can I do in front of the camera? And they sort of look to you as the photographer to be able to walk them through that process. And let's be honest, getting your photo taken is, in many, many cases, very awkward. So I recommend everyone who is a photographer go for it and try modeling for your photographer friends at one point or another, or switch roles and see how it feels. So when I describe sort of some basics to posing, I kind of think of it as this catalog of understanding the body more than pose number 1, pose number 2, pose number 3, because then ultimately you'll run out of poses, which isn't as much fun. And posing ultimately comes down to more of an understanding of the body and what looks good on camera, as opposed to memorizing a bunch of poses that you've seen in someone else's YouTube video. What? So here's where we're going to start. Whenever you're in front of the camera, if you're doing more of a straight-on shot, like how I'm kind of facing the camera right now, it's going to look like a passport photo. It's pretty static, there's not a lot of motion, and it's just not really the most flattering way to look. It's going to look like your mug shot, it's going to look like your passport, your driver's license photo. You can start there if you want, but ultimately what we're looking for is a lot of movement of the body, of the spine, of the joints. That's number 1, movement. The second is a lot of space, so space between the joints. And the first way that we can start to kind of tease out what those mean when we're talking about the body as a whole and specifically about the spine region is there's really 3 parts of your spine. And I'm going to start this off by turning not facing directly towards the camera, so now my knees are kind of at a 45-degree angle. So the first part of your spine is called the lumbar spine, and that's sort of like at the very, very base of your back, and it can either be engaged, which kind of automatically makes you stand up taller, or not engaged, where you're sort of either flat or even slumping forward a little bit. But engaging that lumbar part of your spine, if you're posing or working with someone, it works really well to automatically give a little bit of a lift to that pose. The second part of the spine to be really aware of, and this is the part that we generally think about when we think about posing, is the back, like the main part of the spine. So we want that to kind of be like straight up and really feel aware of that engagement. Like if you do yoga or you've done any kind of physical activity where you really have to move and use your spine, this is really comes into play right here. You want to be kind of aware of how all of those different parts of your spine are moving as you're sitting in front of the camera or as you're working that other person through. And what I like to do as a photographer is actually show the person who's sitting in front of me, like, hey, this looks a lot different than this, or this, or this. And each time I'm just twisting different parts of my spine. The second part is head direction. Where does your head face? Where do your eyes go? And this can make all the difference in a portrait. So you'll see in a few of the photos as we walk through some of these, and I pose and Jordan is going to take some pictures, I'm going to experiment with a few of these different angles where my head's placed. And we never want to get super extreme or super dramatic with it because then we end up, getting all sorority posed out in weird ways and it feels like a strange bodily contortion. So you want to think about this with a little bit more grace, subtlety, nuance, and it's the kind of thing, just like anything else, the more you practice it, the more natural it will feel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit up kind of straight, and I have my spine totally engaged. My shoulders are sort of back. It's going to look very different if I'm sort of posing and making eye contact with the camera, as opposed to looking up at the light, as opposed to looking towards the shoulder that's not up. So this is, from where you can see, this shoulder is a bit higher. Can you confirm that for me, Jordan? And this shoulder is a little bit lower. So if I look up towards the higher shoulder, it sort of is this pose that exudes confidence, looking forward. It looks like a DePaul billboard that you might see on the side of the highway. It's very future thinking. And if I tilt my head towards the lower shoulder, all of a sudden it feels sort of like a bit more action movie star. Like I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out and take you on or something, like very heroic. So head position's really important. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about as far as posing is the idea of making space between your joints, between your limbs, because whenever your arms are really close to your body or your legs are super tight together, it's going to give this feeling of a lot more stiffness, which isn't going to come across on the camera well. But also, that being said, hopefully you wouldn't go into your next job interview sitting behind the desk just like this, right? So what you want to do is think about where those spaces can be. Are they sort of between the legs as the person is sitting? Is it a sort of small gap between the arm and the waist? 2 gaps? You want to find those different ways to play with space and making space between the limbs. So that's just my brief guide on posing. There is so much more to it that I hope we have time to go through throughout the quarter. And I hope this is a helpful start to understanding the body and posing for photography.